What's up? Hey, hello, everyone. Wow. So today we are back going to be talking about Survivor Season 43, Episode 10. Almost to the finish line here. So my name is Rachel.
I'm Alyssa. In this episode, we saw a queen fall, rip Noelle. There's only 2 women left. I'm only a little bit salty about it. It's fine.
I thought this was a fun episode. The editing was really cool and quirky throughout the entire episode. So I thought it was edited well. The editing team must have been having a good time here since this was like different.
I thought it was interesting because they didn't edit it in trying to make us think that it wasn't Noelle going home. I think that sometimes the reason the editing falls flat for me is because they try to make someone a target who is never really a viable target. And then it's kind of like, well, you know that this person isn't going home because only one person threw their name out. And so I feel like making it 100% clear who was going home and that Noelle was going home, but then editing the lead up to Noelle going home very differently was cool and interesting.
Yeah, it was different. So I was like, okay, this is fun and fresh. We don't usually see like text going over, oh, here's the plan, step one, two, three. And so I thought it was cute how they had some fun this episode and just didn't stick to the normal status quo of, okay, here's the two people on the chopping block. One of them is going home. Ah, it's a fake out.
I thought it was interesting too because they kind of did a similar thing earlier this season at the merge when they had Owen listing out all of the advantages that people had and
Mm-hmm.
the text was appearing on the screen. It felt kind of like that in the style of the editing. So it was kind of cool that that wasn't just a one-off thing.
Maybe it was the same person editing those two episodes. So they're having a fun time in the back rooms doing this.
Obviously.
So we start off this episode. Sammy is basically, he told Carla the plan. We saw a little bit of that last week. The first group after the split tribal council, they're going back to camp. And we see that Carla is frustrated because this is the first time she says that people intentionally left her out of the vote. And I was like, okay, dang, like good for you, Carla. You are seeing that and realizing that. And so maybe she's realizing, hey, my threat level is a little big. Maybe I need to work on that because people are starting to leave me out of things.
Yeah, it was interesting because a lot of people are having Carla slip down in their Edgic rankings recently. But I feel like for Carla, at least acknowledging that she was going to be left out of the vote and then acknowledging but I wasn't. We got to see some of her strategy here, even if she wasn't a really big player, neither last week's vote out or this week's. But I feel like ethically, she's still in the running. She's just not as high on the list as everyone once had her.
Yeah, I feel like for like Jesse and Carla, those have been like the front runners the entire season. We've talked about them last week. We're talking, oh, potential winners, and they're probably, going to go in that fallen goddess spot. I mean, I feel like if those two go on and win the season, it's like, oh, they've been the top player, since the beginning. So it feels like they're not going to win the season, but something's going to happen where they're going to get chopped right at the end.
It's interesting though because it feels like a lot of players could kind of be in that fallen god spot where both Jesse and Carla kind of had the edit for it. A lot of people are saying that Cody has the edit for it because he was quirky, cool guy. He got a lot of screen time and now he's kind of not getting as much screen time. But I feel like the problem edit wise with both Jesse and Carla is that we get a lot of good strategic content from them, but we don't really get a lot of good personal content. Even this episode, when we saw some personal content from Jesse, his thing of oh, I'm playing for my family is kind of a very generic reason to play Survivor. We hear winners say oh, I'm playing for my family all the time. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess you look more into Edgic than I do because I thought Jesse getting that screen time when we talk about the reward challenge, I was like, okay, learning's a little bit more about him compared to other people who we don't really know much of anything about.
It's interesting because a lot of times, one of the criteria that you look for in winners is them giving a confessional along the lines of, I'm going to win this game. And so I think it's interesting that Jesse did kind of get that kind of moment when he's like, I'm going to get the money, baby. But I also wonder, for him, it seems like his goal in winning is not to play a good game. His goal in winning is to get the money. And, those are two different things. and maybe would be perceived differently by a jury, or maybe he gets the money some other way. To see us still giving out money, so maybe he gets to see a money, but not like the winner money. So
Maybe it's foreshadowing. He's going to get the money, baby.
yeah.
Somehow, some way. So at the beginning of the episode, we also see people are starting to see Sammy as someone who maybe isn't that trustworthy. They see him as flip-flopping. He's playing the middle. And we've been saying that for the past few votes on the outsider's perspective, like, oh, Sammy's here. He's trying to do a lot, but he's trying to make these votes unanimous so he doesn't have to show his cards. So I thought it was really interesting that the people on the show are starting to see, hey, why is Sammy doing all of this? What's his deal? Oh, he's trying to be good with everyone to play the middle.
I mean, I've been saying since the beginning that Sammy isn't going to win, and I feel like this episode kind of just proved it. Like, we basically didn't hear anything about Sammy except for that he was the fall guy, which is not a great look for someone who's setting up to be the winner, especially this close to the end of the season.
Yeah, I guess so. But I think, like I said last week, all 8 people going into this episode, next week going into 7 people, I think all 7 have some kind of story. It's like the edit that is definitely changing perspectives compared to, okay, the lived experiences of the people on the island. But yes, we also see Cassidy. She, like, when Carla's team is back, Cassidy's group comes back, Carla calls out Cassidy's name. Oh, Cassidy, are you still there? And she says, yeah, I'm still here, that kind of thing. And so I thought that was interesting as well. Like, oh, okay, even though there's only 3 women left going into the final 8 this week, people are seeing Cassidy and Carla as a duo. And then for Carla to say, Cassidy, are you still here? Because it's dark, you can't just see everyone who was the person voted out of team 2. I don't know if maybe people notice that, or they're like, okay, yeah, those 2 women are obviously together because there's like 2 girls left here.
Yeah, I do wonder about that. I think it's, yeah, the thing about like the women and like Carla and Cassidy working together and Noelle not really being in on like the all girls alliance is interesting. I guess technically now there is an all women's alliance because Cassidy and Carla are tight. But yeah.
So we also learned that Jesse has 2 idols. He thinks / knows that Carla has the other idol because he heard that she was asking for beads pre-merge, but Jesse knows that Carla hasn't told him that she has the 3rd idol. And so I thought this was interesting as well because we weren't sure, okay, did Jesse give Cody that idol back, or is he still holding on to 2 idols, the Janine idol and now Cody's idol? So here it seems like, okay, we have a little confirmation. He still has 2 idols, whether maybe he gave it back to Cody later in the episode or not. At the start here, he's got 2. And I was like, Jesse's getting a little bit too much screen time. He's got a lot of talking points. And I don't know. I'm like, okay, this week it really feels like they're setting it up for next week, Jesse or Cody to go home. Jesse and Cody were saying multiple times throughout this episode, hey, I feel good. Like, are we running this thing? Oh, we're so high up there. I don't know. I'm like, this is the death knell for next week. They're premonitioning it for us here.
Didn't Jesse tell Noelle, like, oh, Cody was asking for his idol back?
Yeah, but that was like the fake talk.
I mean, it could have also been a real talk.
Yeah, later in the episode, he could have given it back. But the start of the episode, he had 2.
Yeah, but I don't know. I feel like, yeah, it's definitely not a good thing for Jesse and Cody for them to say repeatedly, like, oh, I feel good, we're in control, because yeah. I feel like of the 2 of them, Jesse is probably more likely to go home because he's seen as like a strategic player. He kind of was the main voice for like setting up this Noelle blindside. And so I feel like if everyone is giving him credit for setting up this blindside, it's kind of going to be like, oh, he could do the same thing to me. So
yeah, which I think it'll be interesting if they are editing it this way, because usually with Survivor editing, okay, the episode the person goes home, they get that like dodo confessional, oh, I'm on the top of the world, and then by the end of the episode, they're getting bamboozled and voted out. So it will be interesting. We see Jesse and Cody say multiple times, yeah, we're feeling good, to then next week, potentially them getting blindsided, maybe with an idol, with 2 idols in his pocket or something. Like, that would be some fun editing if they're setting it up this week to tee it off next week.
That would be really good. I always enjoy when there's not instant gratification, like when something is set up and then plays out, just because I feel like we do get kind of bored of the same editing tricks over and over. So, yeah.
So we get to the reward challenge here. Everyone is walking in, and then Carla says, "Loving the black, Jeff," because Jeff is wearing a different color shirt. Usually, he's wearing different shades of blue. And then Jeff, he's like,
Jeff
"Oh,
goes, "Thanks, Carla."
oh,
Well,
such an ick." I was like, "This is so terrible." In a weird, flirty voice, Jeff, please don't say that.
Carla's not into you, Jeffrey.
Jeff is like, he's doing some weird stuff. He's lying to us straight up as a viewer, saying they've always done this in Survivor. He's doing these weird accents, and now he's like fake flirting with the contestants.
I mean, didn't he date a contestant for like a while?
Yeah, but I'm like, this is just so ick. Like, I was so uncomfortable.
Yeah, I was happy when they just started the challenge and just I didn't need to think about that again.
So this is a reward challenge. They have to spin to get a buoy back to them. Then they have to go over some obstacles. One of them is a balance beam. And then to win, you have to land a sandbag from far away onto the top of a pole. And then if you do win this reward challenge, you get to go to the sanctuary overnight, get food, and then you also get letters from home. So
I really like this challenge. I liked the spinny thing that they did. I thought that was a cool way. They always are trying to make the contestants dizzy, but I felt like that was an interesting mechanism. I don't think we've seen it before. Have we seen that before? Do you know?
not really. This is like hip gyrations of like getting it to go.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because some people could not figure out how to get it to keep spinning, and there were some people who could just keep spinning and spinning and spinning. So, yeah, I thought this challenge was interesting because it seems like even though they had to do the whole race thing, the tipping point really was the sandbag toss because Noelle was dead last because she couldn't figure out the balance beam. And then, after being in dead last, she was like one of the first tries she got her sandbag up on the pole. So that really was kind of the choke point for everyone.
Yeah, I thought the balance beam portion with Noelle struggling to get across the balance beam, I feel like that just goes to show like the dream team doing the survivor challenges, like practicing these challenges are probably like all able-bodied people that like they don't even test these challenges for other people, you know? So it's like with Noelle here, it's like physically harder for her because of the leg and because of her hips. Like, you know, it's sort of the balance beam is built in a way that it just made it more difficult for her with the prosthetic legs. So it just like felt really bad for her when she like you can hear her sniffling and crying while she's like can't get over the balance beam and then continually falling off the balance beam for like no issue on her own, but because of the balance beam design. Like it's got to be so frustrating.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Like when they were running all these challenges as like practice challenges, I feel like they must have known that Noelle was going to be one of their contestants. So I would have hoped that they would have had someone on the dream team who had a prosthetic like hers, just because like it should be equally challenging for everyone. And while I understand that like they can't do things like necessarily make the balance beam wider because then it would be like too easy for everyone, but like it should be doable, equally doable by everyone in your cast. Like it's how with the body weight things, like when they have weight challenges, they have it as like a percentage of your total body weight instead of having it as a straight weight, because then they knew that if it was a straight weight, it would benefit the players who are bigger more because they could hold more. And so, yeah, I was thinking about that too, about how I hope that in the future they'll consider making the dream team more diverse, and hopefully there won't be another challenge like this that is totally undoable just because of a physical difference. I guess not totally undoable because she did do it, but I feel like it shouldn't have been as frustrating for her as it was.
Yeah, like, I think it just goes to show, like, how in society, like, there's just so many different kinds of, like, biases, especially in testing. I was reading a book previously about, like, different testing that are done, and, like, one of the things was, like, okay, for, like, crash test dummies, it's usually men's weight and men's height for cars when they're doing those crash tests. So it's like, okay, the women in the driver's seat may be shorter, maybe less weight, they don't do crash test dummies on that, but usually the women's size crash test dummies are in the passenger seat. So there's a lot less data for like women in the driver's seat in car accidents. So I think it's like really interesting to like see that kind of bias in representation and data. And like we see it here where it's like literally not even Noelle's fault that she's having trouble with the balance beam.
Yeah, I hear also about like data bias when it comes to like medications
Mm.
because like in the field that I'm in, we talk about psychiatric medications sometimes and how, different psych meds can be influenced by like hormonal cycles and stuff like that. And so you need to know that kind of stuff, but there's not a lot of data that takes into account the fact that like women's hormones change throughout the month. So yeah, kind of frustrating.
Yeah, and so Noelle, she is having a really hard time on this balance beam, and then she finally makes it through, and just watching it the first time, I was like, "Dang, imagine if Noelle wins now after all of this persistence over the balance beam, like, that would be such an awesome thing to see, and I liked the editing of this challenge as well because it had a lot of ups and downs. They would show, okay, everyone else throwing the bean bags up there, and then the music would swell, and usually I feel like for these challenges, the music sort of gives away who's going to win it because the music will swell right when the person is going to hit the shot, land the sandbag. But here it was swelling and then getting calmer and swelling for multiple people shooting the sandbag. So I was like, wow, this is like actually intense because you couldn't tell from the music who is going to win it.
I thought, like, in my mind, I was like, oh, there's like a pretty good chance that Noelle will at least get close to winning because they spent so much time with her on the balance beam. And like a lot of times when someone's in last place and just totally isn't going to win, they will only show them if it's going to be like an inspiration porn type thing or for Jeff to make fun of them. So, yeah.
And so Noelle, it seemingly looks like she hit that sandbag on her second try based on the editing. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like, that is such a great moment for Noelle to be struggling on the balance beam and then her leg to be sweating off, like she was saying, and then to get this beanbag landed after everyone was there shooting it multiple times and she gets it on her potentially second try.
Yeah, I was so happy for her. I was so glad that like it seemed like she got to, have her moment and despite all the hardships.
Yeah, a great moment. It was really inspiring and I'm like, wow, okay, this is awesome. Noelle, like we've said, she's like so cool and such a badass. So this is like the cherry on top for her, but also sad that she like gets voted out this episode.
Yes, we love you, Noelle. Yeah.
So Noelle, she gets to pick people to go on the reward. She chooses Sammy, Jesse, and then Owen in that order, which I thought that was fine picks for Noelle. I feel like we haven't really seen too much of like Noelle and her strategy besides like last week when she made the steal a vote move and we were talking like, oh, Noelle, we haven't really seen too much of her strategy. And so here, like we've seen, maybe Noelle is on the bottom, not really sure who she's working with closely. So I was like, okay, Sammy, Jesse, and Owen as picks to go with her seems fine.
Yep. I thought it was interesting. She got to explain kind of why she did what she did. And I was hoping that meant that she wasn't going to get voted out soon, but no. Rip.
And by picking Sammy, Jesse, and Owen, maybe the Vessi Baca alliance are sort of, connecting. I guess minus Noelle now because the Vessi Baca, they kicked her out there and then they teamed up with Coco again. But maybe potentially, if Noelle didn't go home here, Vessi and Baca could have formed a thing again because of these picks. And I feel like by allowing Noelle to pick 3 people, so 4 people were on reward and 4 people were left back at camp, Jeff is being too nice. Usually it's not a 4-4 split, especially for such a good reward where you get to sleep away somewhere else and get letters from home. Usually it's uneven, like 5-3, where 5 people are left at camp sad and pissed off, and then potentially a new majority forms. I was like, why is it 4-4? We need to have some angry people here.
Yeah. I always think it's interesting when a majority is left at camp, because then you can like plot, and I don't know. I feel like it would have been more fun if either Noelle hadn't gone home because of who she chose to take with her on the reward, or like she left a majority behind and that was the reason that she got voted out. So it didn't really happen that way, but
exactly. It's never even. Who is too nice here that let it be 4-4 and not a 5-3? Like, there needs to be a majority back at camp so they can be angry and then they start something while the other people are out schmoozing with their pizza and massages.
yeah. It was also like they tried so hard to like make the best of the situation. Cody was like, "Well, I haven't really gotten to spend time with you guys, so I'm glad we got to spend time together." And I was like, "Ugh, be bitter."
Yeah, let's start some fighting. So Jesse, Owen, Sammy, Noelle, they are at the sanctuary, and then we get to hear some from Jesse and Owen's letters from home, which I thought was interesting. We're getting to learn more about Owen and Jesse. Jesse's son named this episode Get the Money Baby, which gotta be cool if Jesse's son is a Survivor fan that like literally he's not even on the show and he named an episode. Like that is pretty cool. And I thought it was interesting though that we got practically nothing from Noelle's or Sammy's letters, which was interesting because I feel like for Noelle and Sammy, we literally know nothing about them besides like their main point of why they got on the show.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, it kind of makes sense because Noelle was going to go home, and I feel like loading it up with both her reward challenge win and all of her stuff from home, it would have been even more heartbreaking when she eventually did go home. Sammy, I feel like him going on the letter challenge and us not hearing anything from his letter was kind of a death knell for his edit. So
yeah, I agree. I'm like, it's so obvious because we hear Jesse talk about his family, Owen talk about his girlfriend and his parents, and then, oh, Sammy's dad is like not eating certain foods anymore. Like, oh, what does that even mean? So it's so distinct, that line of getting that family content and then these two not getting like literally no content from their family. Like, I agree. It's like, okay, Sammy, we know you're 19 and we know you're a pet cremator. What else? And like to not get anything from your family letter here, that's a bad sign, I think.
yeah.
Alas, so at this reward challenge, we start to see some woman on woman drama here. We hear Noelle is targeting Cassidy, the people on the reward, you know, Owen, Jesse, Sammy. They're saying, okay, let's split the votes between Carla and Cassidy. And then back at camp, the losers who didn't get to go on reward, we see Carla and Cassidy targeting Noelle.
Yeah, again, I still feel like I'm not entirely sure why people are targeting Noelle. Like, I feel like she is like a social player, but I don't think she's as much of a social threat as people say that she is, you know? So,
Yeah, a lot of people back at camp, we saw like Cody saying it. Oh, they don't want to sit next to Noelle at the end of the game. They think she's a big threat. And I think like the reasoning that we got, okay, she keeps on making new friends after you get rid of Justine and then got rid of Dwight. And now she's got Owen as a buddy. I guess, you know, that makes sense. But also like, yeah, I mean, she's sort of still on the bottom here, but it also would make sense. Okay, if Noelle is on the bottom, like we've seen with this cast, no one is really willing to rock the boat. Let's go the easy vote. Let's maybe split the votes between Noelle and someone like Owen, who's potentially also on the bottom.
yeah. I think it's really interesting because since Cassidy is now like Ejic's top contender for winner, it feels kind of like the person who's actually going to win tricked you into thinking that someone else was more of a threat than they are. And I feel like it would be more interesting if they like targeted two threats instead of like a threat and then a non-entity, but
It's
here's what it is.
Cassidy's fox woo-woo energy. She's the fox, is like usually like the sly trickster in a lot of like those like stories, and she talks about the fox energy a lot.
Who is her hound?
What is that?
The Fox and the Hound? Have you never watched that movie?
Oh, okay. I guess I was more going like mythology fox.
Well, I was thinking of Disney, so
Opposite fox ends of the spectrum here.
yeah.
So we get to the immunity challenge. They have to balance a board and then they also have to stack chips up to a certain height to win the challenge. I also liked the editing of the beginning part of this challenge. It had a big montage of people dropping and like their chips falling. And I really liked that sound of the chips falling. I was like, okay, we need this as an ASMR because I think that would sound really, really good.
Dude, the sound of the chips falling made shivers run up my spine, but not in a good way. I was just like, oh my god, this noise is so annoying. I feel like
Imagine it in ASMR. It would be so good.
okay. I feel like this challenge kind of showed Cassidy's fox side though, because like the end of the challenge, she didn't continue stacking the like normal wobbly way. She put a bunch of chips like flat, and so then she only had to put like one upright to like make it to the top of the line. So I thought that was interesting, kind of her I guess showing some strategy in something that could have been like a basic challenge.
Yeah, I wonder if someone has a video essay on what the best strategy is for creating a house of cards like this in the best way, because we've seen this kind of challenge multiple times. Like, okay, do you make your chips square or do you do the triangle strategy? So, if anyone knows, I want to know what the best strategy is for like this kind of stacking challenge because we've seen it so much. I feel like someone has to have a video essay on it online.
I feel like part of it is stability versus the time that it takes versus like how many chips that you get.
Yeah.
Because obviously the ones with more chips are going to be more stable, but then also you only get a limited amount of chips. And so if you start building something that's really strong and stable, but then you run out of chips before you get to the top, it's kind of like you might as well have built one of the really rickety towers because you're going to have to tear it all down anyway.
Yeah, which I feel like we've seen in previous iterations of this challenge where people would start at like with squares on the bottom and then they would run out of chips by the end and then they would have to like change something or start over and maybe do triangles. So it's only 3 versus 4 each time. So I'm like, okay, I guess maybe they change the number of chips each time. And so that would change your video essay on the strategy. Because if you get more versus less, like you're saying, maybe you could do square or maybe you have to do triangle if you start with like 40 or 80 chips. But I'm like, okay, yeah, I need to know. Has anyone done the research on the strategy here? What's the best way to make the house of cards?
I also thought it was interesting. It seems like one of the rules of the challenge is you can only move one chip at a time. And it's like if I were on Survivor, I would like grab a handful, put all of them but one in my mouth, and then like do it that way so I wouldn't have to rock back and forth so many times.
Yeah, true. Like stick them in your shirt or something or like bra.
I wouldn't put it in the shirt just because I feel like that would tumble down. I feel like mouth is quicker distance, but
Mm. I thought this was a good challenge though. It was fun because anyone could win, anyone could lose. It's not like the super physical challenges that might favor a certain kind of person or player. And so this was cool. Like everyone was sort of in it. A lot of people were dropping a bunch, but Cassidy pulls out the win, which basically cemented Noelle going home. Because pre-immunity challenge, we saw, okay, they're going to maybe split the votes on Cassidy or Carla, or the votes are going to be on Noelle. And so, because some people know that Carla has an idol and people this season, we've seen them want to just go with the flow. If Cassidy's not up for elimination and people know Carla has an idol, I feel like people aren't willing to throw out another name to maybe split the votes on Carla and someone else, which I guess we saw happen as a fake plan. But I'm like, oh, Noelle is for sure going home now after Cassidy won.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I thought it was good that they didn't try to like make a decoy edit and have someone else as a decoy, because it wouldn't have worked as well. So like just having it be Noelle is going home and here's our master plan worked.
Yeah, Cassidy, I thought got a lot of good screen time as well. After she won the challenge, she gets another confessional about winning the season. And I was like, wow, okay, that's at least like 2 or 3 confessionals she's had about winning. So that's a sign.
Mm-hmm.
So we see Jesse and Cody, they have a hard decision. Jesse is saying, okay, this is head versus heart, but he said it in other words. I'm saying it's head versus heart. Head, you'd vote Noelle out because she's a strong player. They're saying heart, Noelle gave you the letters from home. Let's keep her in because she just did this thing for you to go and backstab her now after she gave you the letters. Sort of mean, but all is fair in Survivor. They don't owe you anything. So then we get that Jesse 3-step plan in the editing back room where he throws Sammy under the bus.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I get why you would consider like, oh, Noelle just did this really kind thing for me, so I'm not going to vote her out. Again, I'm kind of skeptical of the whole idea of like, oh, Noelle is a powerhouse who definitely needs to go right now. But meh.
Can't trust anyone, Alyssa. You give them letters from home, they're going to go straight and backstab you. Similar in dating. Can't trust anyone.
Mm.
So with this edit as well, I think Gabler is on the up and up. We see Jesse and Cody, they're not willing to vote Carla out yet. So they're like, okay, the head move is to vote Noelle out because we're not willing to vote Carla out yet. Jesse and Cody laughing about how they're steering the ship, hee hee. But then we see this conversation between Gabler and Carla, which hopefully is foreshadowing for next week because that would be very fun, where Gabler is saying he sees Jesse and Cody as the true power couple. Carla agrees, and they say, we need to make a move against Jesse and Cody. I was like, okay, I hope this happens because it will be some spiciness next week.
I hope so too. I feel like it would make next week really interesting. And another threat would be going down.
Yeah, I'm like, for Jesse and Cody, if one of them does go home next week and if both of them potentially don't make it to the final 3, maybe this move here at final 8 and not voting out Carla and maybe doing a split vote between Carla and Sammy like Jesse's backup plan and voting Noelle out instead, maybe that would be the move that would lead to their downfall. Compared to, okay, here maybe they decide to vote Carla out, but then like they were saying, Carla is a shield sort of. Jesse and Cody would then also potentially be the next ones up to go. So sort of hard there, but like, I don't know. I think it was good for Gabler to realize this. And we see Jesse saying Gabler is a smart guy. It seems like Jesse is well respected out there. So if Jesse were on the jury and maybe Gabler made final 3, even though Gabler was getting that dodo edit at the beginning of the season, maybe people would respect Gabler and he's not like, hee hee, putting palm fronds on everyone, annoying everyone, but maybe people would give him some votes if he makes it to the end, especially if Gabler takes out Jesse or Cody.
Yeah, I feel like final 3, I could see Sammy as a 0 vote finalist, Gabler as like a 1 or 2 vote finalist, and then whoever else is sitting there as like the winner. So
sort of reminds me of like a Romeo Mike Turner, Mike Gabler.
Yeah.
Gabler also has a confessional where he's saying he has options, he's in the middle, he's not being targeted, and low-key agree. If people do actually respect him, even though he got that dodo edit at the beginning of the season, I was like, okay, that could be some good things for Gabler coming up because, like he said with the Gabler stuff, he is sort of laying low right now.
I mean, I think part of it is you can respect someone as a person, but not as a player. And that might be kind of where Gabler's at, where like people like him and they think that he's like a good person, but they don't necessarily like him as a player. But I don't know. Oh, one thing about this episode that kind of bothered me was, again, they were making like Gabler was a surgeon because Jeff asked him like, "Oh, what part of the surgery are we in now?" And I was kind of like, "He's not a surgeon."
Yo, that was
So
the next thing in my notes. Tribal Council. I rolled my eyes so hard when Jeff teased Gabler up to make a medical metaphor. I was like, stop. He teed Cody up to make a surfing one, and now we don't need any more analogies. You don't
yeah,
need
we
to
don't
tee
need more
up.
metaphors.
Yeah, like you don't need to set it up for someone. Just let it happen naturally. You don't gotta say, yeah, Gabler, what part are we at here?
Yeah, it just, especially because no one but Gabler is going to understand the metaphor that he used. Like, at least with Cody's surfing metaphors, like, people kind of know what surfing is, they kind of know how you do it. Like, unless someone else has a very detailed understanding of the anatomy of the human heart, when Gabler's like, oh, we're going past the aortal dissection or whatever, everyone else is just kind of like, sure, whatever you say, Gabler. So
Jeff's got to stop.
yeah,
We need a
just gotta stop.
petition. A petition out here. So the votes, we get 5 votes for Noelle. It is like the Coco and Vessi people. Carla, Cassidy, Gabler, Jesse, and Cody are the 5 votes to vote Noelle out. Owen and Sammy are the 2 votes on Carla. And then Noelle is the only person here to vote Sammy out. And I thought this was interesting because Owen, once again, left out of the votes. I guess last week he wasn't left out, but seems like he's sort of on the wrong side of the numbers here potentially, or also always being told at the last minute who to vote for if he was voting correctly, like at the Janine vote. So I thought the preview was interesting where Gabler is doing Gabler things and he says, let's get the Baka men back together. I got a solid final 3 plan with you Baka men.
I always think it's kind of cringe when they're like, this is final 3 right here. So, like, Sammy kind of did that this episode also when he was talking to the people on the reward. Like, I feel good about going forward with you guys.
Yeah, but also low key, I feel like I wouldn't want to go to the end with 2 other people from my OG tribe because I feel like I guess maybe it's a fine thing because you would all like cross out each other because you all had the same pre-merge basically, but I feel like post-merge it's sort of hard to differentiate yourself, especially if you all started on the same tribe together. I would maybe go like, okay, you, and then maybe you bring Cassidy and Carla where they would split the votes and maybe you could sneak through as a person from the different OG tribe, but going 3 OG tribe to the end, I don't know. I feel like it's hard to differentiate yourself unless you're like super amazing compared to the other 2 people from your OG tribe.
Yeah, in general, if you go to the end with someone in your alliance, it can be difficult, like kind of a Dom and Wendell situation, where unless one of you was clearly the one calling the shots, then yeah. So
Yeah, split votes, or it's a popularity contest then if people can't differentiate your moves compared to your buddy's moves. Like for Cody and Jesse, I would say don't go to the end together. Hard to differentiate yourself. Even Carla and Cassidy being on OG tribes together would not. I'd vote your girl out if you were like a tight duo. You'd vote your other tight duo out because you wouldn't want to split the votes, especially in a final 3. Final 2, because it's only 2 of you, but final 3, you could accidentally split the votes here.
yeah, and like it's hard to tell when you should cut your like closest ally because if you do it too early, then you're seen as a backstabber. But if you do it too late, it could just be one immunity away from not getting to cut them. So
Yeah, so we see Owen sort of left out again. Sammy also seemingly left out of the vote, which I thought was interesting because we saw how hard Sammy last week was simping for Carla, and then here Carla's in the know and she left her buddy out.
I mean, maybe that makes Sammy realize that he's not actually as in control as he thinks he is. So
That's true. Maybe it's sort of a wake-up call, and Sammy, even though he really respected Carla, wanted her in the know last week, is like, "Ah, Carla isn't actually my buddy. I gotta go back with Gabler and Owen and do a Baka 3."
I do wonder if part of it is because Sammy was like the decoy name. Because like you never want to tell someone like, oh, we're gonna tell this person that we're splitting between you, or that like you're the target, because then that makes them really insecure, and then Sammy can be kind of flighty and flippy. And so if you tell him like, oh, you're the decoy, that could make him freak out.
Yeah, and I think it's also a combination of people seeing him as the middle person, the flip-flopper, like we saw at the top of the episode, that I guess he's sort of fallen down in the ranks, and I feel like it's interesting because a few weeks ago when Sammy was trying to make a move and then it didn't end up happening on the Janine vote, we were thinking, oh, is this the last time Sammy could have potentially made a move? So it'll be interesting to see, okay, can a move be made to like get rid of the majority going forward? But I feel like, I don't know, there's not really, I guess, a set majority, but there's like people on the bottom, but maybe that is majority minority.
Who knows?
So I'm excited. I think next week will be fun. Like we were saying, even Final 8, it was going to be interesting this week because who can get the power? And there's so many, like we were saying, I think all 7 people have a semi shot. They can all say something if they can conjure up something or make some big moves in the next few weeks before the finale. They have something to talk about at Final Tribal. And next week, if it is actually a Jesse versus Cody on the chopping block, I think that'll be very fascinating.
Yeah. So I'm really excited for next week. Let us know in the comments down below what you thought of this episode. Is Noelle your hero the way she is mine? Do you think that Cassidy is now the top contender for you, or do you still have someone else as your winner pick? Allie Gabler, what are your thoughts, feelings, etc., etc.? Let us know all this and more in the comments down below, and we will see you guys next week for another episode.